Ladies and gentlemen, the Kids in the Room podcast. Kids in the Room podcast.
That's right. That's right.
Brought to you by Move Faces TV.
Woo! All right. Hey guys, welcome to the Kids in the Room podcast. Today we've got Peter Paul Parker on the show all the way from the UK. Peter, what's going on, man?
Yeah, well, it's been a weird time in the UK. We've had snow a week ago and we had hot sun, and yeah, it's all good though. It's all good. I mean, I personally love the sunshine, but the cold weather comes as well. So it's like the seasons is always changing. But yeah, I'm good. I've been working hard.
I hear you. So, what is your so what's it been like? So I think you said you were a musician and now you've gotten to the spirituality and meditation and stuff like that. Can you tell me more about it? Like, how did this happen? How do we get from music to the spirituality? What happened? What kind of music? Let's talk about it. Let's do it.
Yeah. When I was very young, I had a really idyllic childhood, and my father became disabled when I was 10 years of age. He became disabled all down his left-hand side. My mother had to look after the six boys. We had six of us, and she became ill. She got gallstones and she got cancerous. So she unfortunately passed away when I was 11. I was sent off to boarding school, and I was just going through trauma after trauma with pedophiles at the boarding school, and like they're trying to condition me, making me sort of into a person that I didn't want to be, basically. And then when I came out of school, my father died when I was 19, and I just jumped from job to job, and I've just found like the corporate world corrupt and everybody's stealing and thieving from each other, which really wasn't my thing. So I decided to walk away from that, and I just went into music. It was really blues-based rock really was what I was into, but I went to bass guitar college to learn all the different styles of music, and I was hanging out with some quite good session musicians or top session musicians in that college, and I was kind of doing bob job gigs. And music, I found now when I look back at it, was like an enormous meditation for me, especially when we used to improvise on stage, because you're in that moment, and if we are with really other good musicians around you, you kind of create that moment, and it creates and builds upon itself. And when you're in a packed audience as well and you're doing that, I mean, man, that is like a real meditation in itself. And that was, I found, easing the trauma that I had, and also obviously the partying, the drinking side of it and all that kind of business. That was easing everything, and it was wonderful journey. I played some really enormous gigs, and I toured Europe, and then that kind of dried up as the music business changed. Everybody in the business at the time was kind of saying, well, this is all changing. And I met quite a few people going around the circuit when I was learning how to do meditation and things like that, coming out of the music business saying, well, I can't make a living out of that anymore. So it's kind of, it was being whittled down. And my thing was really sort of live gigs. And in the UK, when I was growing up, or in England, we had gigs on every corner. All the pubs were packed, and it was like a really cool scene, and you could make a living out of it. But that all dried up, and the session work really hard to get into and break into. And I started to look at energies and spirituality, and I actually wasn't into this at all really at first, but I bought this bracelet, or my wife gave me this bracelet of it had red carnelian on it, which was like a crystal, and it made me think about what I'd been through, because I'd had a few out-of-body experiences while being a musician. So I realized that this is like not what you think it is, this reality. But I started to write different type of music, which was more sort of a chanting sort of world music. And I actually got signed with that for myself as an individual artist rather than as a session musician. So that made me go into a completely different path, because I was looking at the chakra system, the energy systems, and how our energy body is just as important as our physical body. And I got that album released. I thought, oh, good, my career's changed, I'm moving forward. And then I looked on the internet and I realized that it was being offered for free on all these different pirate sites. So nothing came of that. And I was thinking, what am I going to do next? Asking the universe, what am I going to do next? Where am I going to go with this? And I walked around the corner. We found this Qigong sort of body and brain. It was called Dhan Yoga at the time. And I started talking to the woman about how my career was fading and that I was worried about the state of the world and like everything's going horribly wrong and all this business. And she said, I think you should come and try this. And I'd never done any sort of group exercises before or anything like that. And I went into this class with my wife, actually. She convinced me to do it. And I was very skeptical at first, because they're saying, well, you can do this and this is going to help you and lead you out of your trauma and your stress into being a lot more peaceful and sort of less anxious and less stressed. And I thought, oh, yeah, that sounds good. Sounds good. And it took quite a while before it really started to make its mark on me. But immediately, I must say, my stress and anxiety started to fade as soon as I started to realize that it was like the deep breathing and connecting inside of myself was actually, oh, I should be doing this. So as that carried on, I was asked, because I was like quite a gregarious person in the center that I was going to, they asked me if I'd go and teach Qigong to an elderly crowd. And I thought, oh my goodness me, I've been hanging out with all young people, and it was like the music business, and all my elderly relatives had died. So I had nothing in connection with any elderly people. So I thought, all right, it's a challenge. I'll go and do that. So I went and started teaching Qigong in this elderly community center. And I suddenly realized, wow, these are just souls in an elderly vehicle. They're the same as me, much the same as me, but they're just elderly souls in a vehicle.
Right.
And I started to turn them around. Because they're all thinking, oh, the elderly in this country, maybe the same in America, I don't know. But in this country, they feel like they've been chucked on the scrap heap. So I'm going in there and saying, no, you've got value. Share these principles that I give to you, because I teach mainly from the Tao philosophy. And I share these principles with your family. And they were coming back and saying, Peter, this is wonderful, because we're sharing these things to our children. Our children, not our grandchildren, are picking up on this. But our children, like, no, this all sounds like gobbledygook to me. So that there's like a weird generational gap here in this whole process of all of this happening. But it was the elderly that really sparked my imagination to think, if I can turn people's arthritis around, like some of the ladies couldn't open jars, and by the time I'd finished with some of the Qigong practices I was doing, they were opening jars again. They were starting to feel brighter. They were starting to put more sort of makeup on and doing their hair a little bit more, actually finding something to live for, because they were just basically connecting with themselves more with this practice that I teach. And I thought, wow, there's something really, really big to this. And I set up a charity because of that, so that I could do it in a wider area for the elderly people. And I do that now as a Qigong instructor. Now I'm a meditation coach as well, and I do online courses and things like that to try and get people to get past this material world that we live in, this material body, which is just a vehicle, and actually tap into the greater potential that we all have as human beings. And that's really the story, like in a potted history, of how I came from being into a rock musician to like a Qigong instructor and a meditation coach and an online course runner as well. So that's really the potted history of me.
Well, I mean, that was a mouthful. That was definitely a mouthful for sure. And I got a lot of, I got a bigger picture into kind of where you came from, and kind of just your whole experience. What I would like to know as well is, like, you said music, kind of was dying out. The pubs were normally like, they pretty much was a line, lines around the block or just full in general. What happened?
In this culture, the English culture, or British culture, says is a real pub culture. So the pub was like the extension of our front room, and we were brought up to drink heavily, all of us. And it was like that was the place to go. And music exploded in the pubs. It was people like the Rolling Stones, which were from my local area, and the Beatles actually from around this area as well. And they used to play the local pubs, and it was a wonderful place because we had this whole emergence of like the punk rock scene and people sort of being rebellious and saying, well, no, we don't want to be ruled by an authoritarian state. We want to be sort of our own sort of rebellious ways, in our own rebellious ways. And the pubs started to raise their prices. I remember speaking to a Swedish friend many years ago, and we have obviously pounds, which is about $1.5, and used to be able to go to a pub with £10 in your pocket, so that would be like $15, and you could have what you'd have 10 pints of beer, which I don't know how many, but 10 pints of beer and a packet of cigarettes, and you'd have change out of that £10, out of that $15. And by the time I'd stopped going to the pubs, after speaking to that Swedish guy, he was saying that they at that time they were charging £4 to £5 a pint of beer, and I said, "There's no way I'd ever spend £5 for a pint of beer." Now that's the kind of price in London. You go into London, there's £5 for a pint of beer. Do you know how much it costs to brew a pint of beer? It's like 2 or 3 pence, and you got like this enormous overhead. So it drove a lot of the poor people out of the pubs, and they started to hang out in street corners, and that's when the gang culture started to come into the UK, and lots of drugs and things like that, and it kind of ruined the community atmosphere that we had as people started to come out of the pubs. It was great. It was a really vibrant time, and it was everybody. It just seemed freer, a lot happier, a lot more vibrant in the communities. Now it seems a lot darker, a lot more sinister. And
What do you mean by
the
that?
government has not really been our friends in that respect.
Wait, but
well, in many respects.
But Peter, what do you mean? Like it got sinister? There was gangs. What's going on? Explain to me. Talk to us.
Well, you're going into pubs. There was violence, more violence happening when there wasn't violence before. It was music and a celebration, and there were people every time. Like a really cool place would open up, you'd get the people coming in and pushing drugs and things like that around in the background, and then they would get shut down, and there'd be raids, and then you get other gangs coming in, and you get fights happening. And I remember playing at a football club, and we were playing away. It was some function we were doing. I can't even remember. It's so long ago, but we kept having to move the gear back just a little bit because this enormous fight in front of us. It was It was just incredible, absolutely incredible.
Gangs in the UK. This is crazy. So like, how did gangs, like what changed within the culture to where there was gang culture that got popular?
Well, we had like the mods and the skinheads. Like the rockers, the mods and the skinheads.
Right.
They were like the skinheads were like the Kingston lot. And I had long hair at the time, so I was kind of like a rude boy, which was like more into the ska type music.
Right.
Even though I was a rocker. And the mods were like more into the sort of R&B type, sort of the Who kind of bands. And these were the original gangs that started to populate the UK, England. And so you had fights all the time between the mods and the rockers, especially in my local area. And if you go into a mod pub and you were associated with the skinhead, you get beaten up, and vice versa. It was crazy times, really crazy times. And this was what kind of was ruining it, because there was, again, polarity happening in our society, which is always promoted by the governing forces. They always promote polarity, and that's why the gangs were setting up, because they were polarized. They were said, well, no, you don't like that lot, they don't like you. And actually, as human beings inside all of us, what is there not to dislike? Maybe your energy that you're purveying at the time. But this gang thing was like, it was not as famous as the American gangs. Was it the Bloods and the Crips?
Right.
But it was there, and also there was like the real gangsters, what I call the real gangsters, which were like the Krays and people like that. They were kind of in the background as well. I remember they came to our house, the Kray twins, because my father was a car dealer, and they came in and they just wanted to do some business with us, and they were fine. But if you cross them, you're gone, you know. So there's that higher level of gangster in the UK, but it was they never ever went outside of their jurisdiction. They were like just gangsters, you know. If you were in their sort of vicinity or in their sort of game, anything could happen to you. If you were outside of their game, they would leave you alone. They would completely not touch you. Whereas that kind of eroded away when more of the, not that I'm against immigration at all, but there was more immigrants coming in, like Croatian gangs and things like that. who didn't care. They didn't have that code of honor that the English gangsters seem to have. So that kind of eroded away, and then it became like the knife culture. And I remember the first time that the knife culture came into the streets of Kingston, when they used to use Stanley blades, Stanley knives, just to flicker an inch of flesh out of you to mark you, to say that you've been had by another gang.
Wow.
That's how bad it was on the streets. You know, it was like it was quite brutal. And this went on to like guns, and guns came onto the streets of Kingston. And I remember when I was threatened by two people with guns, and I thought, it's time for me to get out of this area, because I don't know, because of my trauma, and I had elder brothers. I wasn't bad at fighting. I'm not proud of it, but I wasn't bad at fighting. So I built myself up a reputation, and because I had that reputation, and the guns were coming onto the street, apparently two people wanted to kill me at that point. I thought,
wow.
You know, fisticuffs is enough, but if you're going out with guns, there's no way I want to kill another human being. To me, it was just anger and trauma that I was expressing when I was fighting. When it comes to actually killing another human being, if I had to, well, I mean, we got to defend ourselves, but I got out of Kingston at that point. So England is not as sweet and quaint as some people think it is. There is a real sort of underlying culture here that is quite dark. Well, it is dark. And I did live through that in the streets of Kingston, even though Kingston is one of the richer boroughs in London. It's a London borough now, and it's one of the richer ones, and it's looked upon where you've got big actors and celebrities living up on the Kingston Hill, where you've got all the money and the swimming pools and all this kind of stuff. You come down into the streets, there's areas that you wouldn't walk through at night, you know, but that's kind of happening everywhere in the world, isn't it, really? You've got all these different areas that are happening. So, but yeah, it was gangs and violence and fighting, and I'm glad I was out of that, because I definitely saw the darker side of life through that. I definitely saw that, and I'm glad I got out of it, because it feeds on itself, and it goes around and around and around. And unless you wake up and pull yourself out of it, you go, oh, you just keep going down and down and down. And I'm glad I saw it and moved away from it.
But Peter, let me ask you a question. So, I mean, I think a lot of people think, and you even mentioned something that was really interesting as well. You said something about Americans with the Bloods and the Crips and things like that. And I think like it's interesting that, you know, that you even know about the Bloods and Crips, and that's such a big gang. And I wonder if it's just like the media just promotes America to certain people, or just in general around the world as a certain place. Because like the Bloods and Crips, I mean, I guess they're big, but they're not that big, but they are that big. You know, it's just like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like this big terror on the United States where you're just walking across the street and there's just like Blood, you know, and Crips and different gangs like that consistently. You have to go in certain areas for these things to kind of exist, or, you know, certain people. It's not something so common that you just like, you gravitate towards these type of things typically in the United States. You just don't like, hey, there goes a Blood and Crip, you know. You might even see a Hell's Angel before them. It just depends on where you're going. But it's not. I think it's funny how, you know, America, or, you know, media promotes America with certain interesting themes or groups, like as if they're normal, and it's odd. And I think you mentioned something like, when people think of the UK, they don't think of, you know, violence. They don't think of gangs. They don't think of skinheads. They don't even think of rockers having gangs. They think of hip hop. You know, they think of, you know, rappers and that type of culture having, you know, gangs. They don't think of, hey, look, when I go to UK, there's going to be skinheads and they're going to be fighting, and there's people with long hair and who like to rock and roll, and they're in gangs. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's a stereotype around the world, and it's promoted depending on how, you know, how powerful the country wants to promote different things within that country. But nobody thinks, you know, outside, who hasn't probably been there and lived there, doesn't think that the UK has gangs or violence in general. And I always sit there and say to people, it's like, you know, because there's some, you know, random drama and crazy stuff going on in the United States, and just like any other country, but it's all about who promotes what. And so that's what people learn. And it's interesting because it's like, here, you know, I mean, you have gangs, you have theft, you have communities, you have groups, but I think in the United States they try to demographically put it to people based off of their ethnicity of who is violent, which is kind of like, it's just funny because when we're talking about UK, we're probably talking about a assorted amount of people from all over, right? And then when we're talking about these groups, you know, with long hair and stuff like that, they don't probably look like what they typically would say as a stereotype of an American gang per se, right? And I just think that's interesting because, you know, these groups and you know and et cetera in UK, are they typically, you know, in poverty, or, you know, are they typically middle class families? What are they? What type of family backgrounds do these type of gangs and stuff originate from? If you had to paint it,
that's a brilliant question, because if you look at so we had enormous football violence, which was kind of a gang culture in itself, because it's like, I'm the blue flag, you're the red flag, I'm going to kill you. And that was like enormous in the 70s and the 80s, where you couldn't go to a football game without the violence happening. And these were people who worked in the city, you know, with ties and suits and things like that. And they would go to the football matches at the weekend just to get the violence and the buzz and snort their cocaine and drink as much beer as they can, and prostitutes and all this kind of stuff. It was that kind of people were doing that. On the other side of that, you've got the really poor housing estates and areas where in rich countries, which is England or the UK is looked upon as rich countries, the people are always poor because the people above them are always taking from them. And so you've got these big areas in England now, or the UK, I should say, that are, it's the poor people who are like really becoming what I would call feral almost. And it's not their fault, because you speak to them and they're completely, look, I'm in trouble here, but I don't know what to do. It's like I remember speaking to a young guy on a bus, and I was on the bus, and he was doing something that was really annoying me, and I just turned around and said, "Excuse me, could you stop doing that? That is really," he's tapping or something or humming to himself. He says, what are you talking about? You got really angry. I said, why are you getting angry with me? He said, well, none of you know what's going on and what's happening, and you're not listening to us, and this is complete rubbish. And I went, whoa, you know, I'll listen to you. What have you got to say?
right?
And he was talking about the unfairness of the world. He's come into this world, and he's saying, what they want me to do is go and get a really big job, and then get a mortgage for the rest of my life, and then do the 9 to 5 and all this kind of stuff, and then die at 60, 70 after repaying a mortgage and things like that. And he said, it's like my life feels like it's just mapped out. And right here at the bottom, I have to really work my backside off. And this is like a 12, 13-year-old kid, work my backside off just to get by at the moment. You know, my parents are really struggling. We haven't got any money in the house. And you see all these different people who are running the society, who are just like the banking system, the fiat currency banking system. They create the money out of thin air. He's talking like this. They're creating the money out of thin air. And yet if we want money for poor people, they've got nothing. But if they want a war, they go and they can find money from anywhere they want, and then charge the taxpayers back for that lending of that money where they create out of thin air. And I'm going, my goodness me, where's this coming from? And he went on and on like this, and he's obviously been watching a lot of conspiracy videos and things like that. But his information was really on the button, as it were, and he really did see the unfairness of the society. And he was coming from a very poor place. I think it was up from Tower Hamlets in London. And it was just fascinating for me to have this conversation on the bus. And at the end of it, we gave each other a hug. I said, look, mate, I'm not your enemy. And just because I wanted you to stop tapping or whatever he was doing, humming, he said, I just find that behavior disrespectful, because this is my space and I'm stuck here with you in this space, and we should really try and honor each other's sort of feelings in this space. And he really agreed with that, but he was obviously in his own angry spot. So to answer the question, really, it's a really weird mixture of, you've got rich people doing this, like the football hooliganism, but the poor, the really poor, they're the ones who set up the gangs, because you've got the bullies at the top of that whole estate. If you don't join their gangs, you'll get hurt, really seriously hurt. And now they call it like postcode gangs. They're postcode gangs. So they've got like a manor. They call it a manor.
Mm-hmm.
And they go outside of their manor now. And what some of them do, which is incredible, they'll go out into like the south coast, because England's really small compared to America. They go down to the south coast, and they'll find houses where there'll be vulnerable adults staying there. And what they'll do is they'll break into the house, keep that vulnerable adult as a knife point, and then they'll start using that house as like a drug den. So they're selling the drugs into the local areas down by the south coast, and the police kind of doing things about it, but not very much. So the whole sort of underclass of these gang cultures it just seems to be getting worse and worse and worse. It's quite incredible. But you don't think this is happening in England, but it is. It is happening. It's an enormous divide as well, where there's other people actually moving away, like myself, moving away from that and looking at it and go, I don't want any part of this society over there anymore. I'm going over here, and I want to create something over here, which is what I'm trying to do now with my practice and the people that I'm meeting. Because it's like you're saying, why do I know so much about America? Is because it's promoted like that, because people want the Americans to look like the bad boys of the world. And yeah, they've got some politicians up there who really do need to go to court and go to prison for the rest of their lives. But it's not the American people, because we went to San Francisco, then drove up to Oregon.
Nice.
We went to San Francisco, loved it, loved the area, loved the Bay Area. And then we went over to I think it was called Tenderloins, the place, because a friend of mine was kind of into that. And we walked around Tenderloins and went, whoa, that's pretty rough. But the rest of San Francisco was wonderful. And then we went up to Oregon and visited Portland and areas like that, Bend. It was beautiful. Yes. And the people, one of the towns we went into, it was like, what is this place? Because there was no road sort of laws, as it were, because people were just giving away to you all the time. Even if they had right of way or not, they were just giving way to you. And you thought, this is completely different to like Tenderloins to here. This is like a utopia to like what that is. And it's really amazing that we get these perceptions of countries when you actually go and meet the real people. You go, wow, that was incredible. So our interactions in America have been wonderful since we've been going over there. And I've been to New York as well, which I thought was a wonderful, wonderful town, Manhattan. I mean, personally now, I love the countryside. So going up from San Francisco up to Oregon, you've had all these beautiful redwood forests you go through and things like that. I loved all of that. And America's just such a wonderful country. But yeah, we know about the gangs, and we see all the the guys, the politicians come onto our radio station sometimes, and you go, oh God, what is he saying? What is he saying? And what they all say is a load of old rubbish anyway. The politicians, they don't seem to be attached, or well, I should say they're completely detached from the people these days. It's just what's happening in the world today, and what they're talking about is incredibly out of sync with each other. It's so bad, and that's why I feel that right at the very bottom of our society, it's kind of rotting. But you do have a choice. I personally believe that you have a choice now to move out of that, and I think more and more people are starting to move out of that, which is what I'm trying to do now in my local area. Rather than helping elderly people, I'm going to start trying to get into the younger generations and try to say, well, look, move yourself from here to here, and then you've got a choice to go through. Because I think life is a little bit more different compared to what we think it actually is. We're trained to think that life is, you get up in the morning, you go to work, you go to bed, then you get up in the morning, do the same thing again. You get the train, it's like a linear line, just keep going and going and going. When actually you can make cycles yourself, change your cycles, change your perceptions of the world, and actually start to create a life that you actually want, rather than being told how your life should be. And that's what I'm really all about now is look, come on, we can change this. And there's more people actually starting to do that now, which is fantastic. I'm seeing more green shoots on the internet and more green shoots in my local area where people go, come on, we can do this. You know, we can change this.
What do you mean by green? Do you say green suits? Green shoots? What's that?
Green shoots is like little embers of new growth, new spirituality emerging, new people actually going. I see what you're saying now, because when I was very young, when I started talking, people go, Peter, what are you on? What are you on? What are you talking about? And now when you're saying actually you can change yourself inside and you can actually move yourself to a different position and raise your energy, raise your vibration. When we realize about the quantum world and the everything's vibration, we can actually raise that vibration. But you've got to realize what that vibration is. And you've got to realize that it's inside of you. The power's inside of all of us. And what we've been trained to do is give our power away. So we've got that a classic example now with health is we're being told we've got to give our power away in the UK because of this, what's happening with the virus. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. And I've questioned the Public Health England, I've questioned my politicians, things like that, and saying, well, why are you saying this is the only way out of this when it isn't? And there's a holistic way out of it, which is what I'm into now, is actually empowering the body to be more resilient. Because if you think about it, we've been on this planet for about, well, some people say 150,000 years, some people say longer. There's a few people who say about 3,000 years, but I wouldn't go along with that. And our biological system has developed with that. So we have bacteria and viruses in our body all the time. And if we didn't have them in our body, we would be dead. Basically, we would be dead. And about, I don't know, I think it's about 30% of our gut is actually made up of bacteria and viruses. And that's what we call our immune system. And that's what keeps changing every day. And it's incredible to say that people are coming in and say, well, actually, I want to come in and interact with your immune system. And I'll say, well, why? Because it's strong. And I've been having this discussion with some of the people in my local community and my local government representative, my MP, and goodness me, the ignorance that's coming out of that is breathtaking. And that's what I'm talking about. Green shoots. There's more people speaking like this now. People come around to our house and they're saying, these people just don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're talking about. And what they're doing is they're putting onto us what they feel like they're talking about. And what I'm really pleased to see are these green shoots that are coming, that people are saying, well, actually, yeah, I'm not having this anymore either. So there's a big change in my local area where I used to feel like I was alone, saying, well, actually, there is a change coming, but we got to work on it, and we got to work on it for ourselves first, and then work on it for our community. And that's what I mean by the green shoots. There's more people actually raising the consciousness and looking at this and saying, oh, we've got to change this, boy. We've got to change this. It was Einstein who said, wasn't it? You can't fix a problem with the same consciousness it was created with. And was he right? Yeah, he was right. And some people say that Einstein was some kind of shill for the New World Order or something like that. And I'm going, well, I don't know about that. But he said that he was saying, if you want to know the secrets of the universe, look into nature. And you look at us, we are the only species on the planet that isn't acting naturally. If you think of a leaf will shine or put the leaf towards the sun naturally, or a mammal will naturally go to its mother's teat to eat. And all these natural things occurring, there's us actually destroying and killing everything. And we're the only species, I think, that actually just destroy our environment. And it's not us. It's not us. It's what's controlling us and what's governing us and what's guiding us as a species. And I think a lot of people are having enough of that and just going, not anymore. And that's a really interesting conversation itself, where that's actually come from thousands and thousands of years ago, and right, where that was, and how this has come to be. There's many theories about it, which I find fascinating, but it's where we're at now and where we're moving to is also fascinating, because I think there will be an enormous change. Not in the next couple of years. You've got to have a bit more of a vision than that. But in the next,
what do you think that's going to be? What do you think that change is going to be in the next coming years?
Well, I'm a great reader of the Vedas, the Vedic scripts, and they call this time the Kali Yuga. And if you read the Kali Yuga and the scripts about this time, they talk about the Maya, which is the illusory world, the illusion. And if you look at the mainstream media now, a lot of that is illusory, and a lot of people are talking like what people say in fake tongues or lying, and so it's all sort of like a big illusory world. And the ancients used to call that the Maya. And they're saying the people who are starting to connect, and this is what they say in the Vedas, the people who start to connect with themselves at this time are the ones who will be okay. You might not have the life that you want, like the millions in the bank and the swimming pool and all this kind of stuff, if that's what you're into. You won't have that. But if you really do start to focus on yourself and get a lot more spiritual, as it were, you'll be able to navigate yourself through this crazy world in a lot easier way. And so they say now we're just approaching a 10,000-year-old golden age, which is what the Vedas say. So it's like we've almost hit the bottom. I don't think we've quite hit the bottom yet. I think there's some real big things to come. And then once we hit that bottom, I think we're going to bounce up. And in about 70 years' time, maybe for your children, they'll see a completely different world where human beings will actually be more conscious, because we are, well, most of the human beings are asleep at the moment. You can't have a conversation with anybody about too many things, because they I don't know, there's these self-righteous people who just seem to want to bang you over the head with their morals, and I'm going, well, I'm not a bad person, but if I say something to you that doesn't fit into your
narrative, right,
dogmatic belief system, right, you're going to belt me over the head with it. And I'm going, whoa, I want to live in peace, but also want to have fun as well. There's you can have all of that. You can have your fun, you can live in peace, you can navigate through this world, because it's a wonderful place to be in that respect. But because of the control that we're under, it's not so great at the moment for many people. But I'm realizing now that you can actually work your way around that and work out of it, which is what I'm doing with my life now, which is fantastic. But that's been, I was watching a Freddie Silver documentary recently, mm-hmm, on the actual the real meaning of ascension and the 3 days of ascension. And it really came from the Knights Templar, which was fascinating. When the Knights Templar was set up from the Priory of Sion, they used to induce a 3-day death, which is your whole body would be almost in pieces. You'd be there, and then they'd wake you up 3 days later, and you would have this experience, this out-of-body experience, where you'll be going into the different realms of reality that we actually all around us. And you go, wow, how that story has been turned upside down, and we're not allowed, or we're not supposed to talk about anything outside of what normal is. And I'm thinking, this is a real serious control that a lot of people I know have had psychic or sort of interesting experiences, and that's the kind of conversation I'm kind of really love, is you say, well, what do you see, what do you perceive with that? It's like I was speaking to somebody yesterday who said, and it took a while for it to come out, because I'd never spoken to them before, and they said, well, yeah, I'm a little bit psychic. And they go, well, why is that? And I said, well, when I meet somebody, I can perceive what's wrong with them, and then therefore I can gently talk around that and get to the point with how to heal that problem inside of them. And she said, well, how do you know that? She said, well, it's like an instinct inside of me. And where does that come from? That's incredible power that we have inside of us, but we're told to suppress that from a very early age. It's really quite incredible, the control that we've got. Me personally, I've had out-of-body experiences, and if you can imagine, I kind of floated out of my body. And if you can imagine just losing everything that you've ever thought was real, just imagine that for a second. Just it all goes poof, and you're sitting there in this point of bliss. It's just a point of bliss, and you can see, but it's not like a sight, and you can hear, but it's not like a hearing, and you're everything that's ever been in your life is like gone. Like your attachment to your parents, to your kids if you got them, to your pets or your friends or your schoolmates or anything like that, all of it goes. and you're sitting there in this element of bliss, and then you come back, boom, and you go, oh, what the heck was that all about? And I remember it happened to me when I was playing with a band called Thin Lizzy. They were quite a famous rock band in the UK at the time. We're playing away in a song, and I remember I shot out to the top of the auditorium. It was a gig for Phil Lynott. He was the old bass player of Thin Lizzy, and he died. So we're doing like a memorial gig for him, and his mother was there and things like that. And I went up. I was sensing that I was like a bubble or like a ball, and I could sense myself down on the stage. But there was all these other balls in the audience above the top of the auditorium, and I was going, oh my goodness me, I'm because it was my first big gig really that I was doing. I was going, this is the gig of my life, and I'm not even in my body to do it. And I don't know how long I was up there, but it was during a song called Dancing in the Moonlight. And then I remember popping back into my body, and we just went to the bar, and we were drinking till about 5 or 6 in the morning, and I was trying to explain to people, they thought I completely lost the plot. And then when I got back home and started talking to the band that I was in and my friends, and they all thought I'd completely gone mad, because I go, there's more to this than this. There's more to this than this flesh and blood. There's more to it. And I really want to find that. And that was kind of coming towards the beginnings of my music career. And what my music career took me away from was the darker side of the music business, which is very prevalent. If you want to go and find it, it's in your face now with some of these rap artists with they've got like satanic type sort of imagery on their videos and things like that. It's really in your face. But I went to one of those parties when I was just coming up the ladder, and I remember two sisters doing this like lesbian show on a stage, and I was going, this is not really my thing. And there was like cocaine and heroin everywhere and all sorts of things and copulations going on and things like that. I go, and I wasn't, I wasn't a prude or anything like that, but I was thinking, it's just the energy just felt really, really dark for me, really dark. And I thought, I'm not really into this. I didn't really want that. So I kind of moved out of like the mainstream sort of high up hierarchy of the pop music, and I just did it like the session musician thing, which was fine because you could bob a job and you go around, you're in the studio all day one day, then you're doing a gig and then things like that, and that was great fun. But there is a darkness to this world that seems to be entrapping us as human beings, and for us as human beings, we can come out of that. And that's what I'm trying to create with like meditation and breathing exercises and things like that, because that's what I'm doing to get myself closer to that position of feeling out of my body. And I kind of can do it now with my breathing exercise, where I can lie in a room and I can feel like, even if the room's packed full of people, I can feel like I'm the only person in the room, as it were, and feel really joyful and blissful without any drugs or alcohol or anything like that. And I'm trying to find a way of getting back to that position and trying to guide other people to get to that position, so they can look at this world and go, yeah, this isn't quite what it seems, and why am I here? And we can start to ask all of ourselves these questions of why I'm here, what am I doing here, what's my purpose, how can I serve more human beings with what I'm doing. That's why I liked your podcast, because you're opening minds up, which is fantastic, and that's what we all got to be doing, is opening minds up, opening the conversation up, listening to what other people have got to say, listening to their experiences and say, wow, what is that all about? And that can inspire more people to actually open up their minds and get more into a spiritual life, as it were. But that word again is kind of got so many connotations to it, hasn't it? And I prefer the true essence of it is, what is your energy inside of you that's going to last after the body decays? Because energy never dies, does it? Energy never goes away. You can't destroy energy. And there's a memory inside, like water has a memory. There's a memory inside of you which won't remember your wife's name or your friend's name or your husband's name or your children's name, but it will remember what you've done in your life to promote your energy inside of you. And that also comes from the Vedas. When we're reading scripts from the Vedas and going, wow, that's what I feel, and that's what I think, and that's what I thought, and there it is written in the Vedas. You take on some of the things that you had in this life into wherever we go next with our energy.
Well,
So
Peter,
it's just-
Peter, this is great stuff. This is great stuff. This is great stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think I've had such a great conversation with you. I think I definitely want to invite you back on because I want to research the Vedas. I want to research more of the stuff that you're talking about and have a longer, have a longer conversation about this. I'm just, you know, I'm having a great time speaking with you and learning your journey. And there's so many questions I have for you. But we're close to time right now. But I definitely want to bring you back on the show. I would love to have you back on the show. And I'd like to
love to come back. It's been a pleasure. I've really let loose here.
Yeah. I want to bring you back on. There's a bunch of stuff that I want to talk about. And I think I've learned so much already from you and your experience. But I definitely want to bring you back on again. I will be reaching back out to you to definitely bring you back on.
Good stuff, man.
What would you... Lastly, before we get off of here, how can people contact you and things like that?
I do. I've got a website, peterpaulparker.co.uk. You can go to that. I run a YouTube channel, Peter Paul Parker. So if you just Google Peter Paul Parker, and you'll find me. I'm everywhere. So I do quite a lot. You can find my album, Man of Heart, that I've got out there. I do blogs where I talk about bits and pieces of this on the YouTube. And it's fascinating stuff, really, just to let yourself go and talk. But the YouTubers, they do pull a few videos now and again because of it's getting quite strict on there. But yeah, peterpaulparker.co.uk. Email me. You can just let me know. Hey, I heard you on this podcast, and I will always respond. I always speak to people. So it's what we're here for, and it is to be here for each other. So yeah, peterpaulparker.co.uk, or just Google it, Peter Paul Parker. You get the YouTube channel. I've got some interesting music on there, which is like a toning thing, which is it's 432 hertz. I don't know if you know about the hertz and music, and how we have healing frequencies, which is sound, and which is amazing stuff. Amazing stuff.
So
like
I'm gonna bring you back on, and we're gonna talk about that stuff. But let's close it out for now. We don't want everybody to know all the secrets, and let's bring you back on, and we're gonna talk about all this stuff. This is a lot of stuff we need to talk about. But thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Pleasure.
I will be reaching out to you and inviting you back on.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Kids in the Room Podcast. Kids in the Room Podcast.
That's right. That's right.
Brought to you by Move Faces TV. Let's go.